The hallways of Westlake High School bustled with the usual Monday morning chaos. Students rushed past lockers, shouting to friends and making plans for the weekend that still seemed so far away. Among them moved a girl who seemed to exist in a different world altogether. A world where making yourself invisible was an art form. Mei Chen walked with her eyes fixed on the worn tiles of the hallway floor. She had perfected the art of taking up as little space as possible, her shoulders slightly hunched, her footsteps quick but quiet. She'd been at Westlake for exactly 3 weeks and 2 days, and so far, she'd managed to speak less than 20 sentences out loud during school hours. She counted them in her head sometimes, a strange little game she played with herself. "You need to see the counselor," her homeroom teacher had told her last week, sliding a hall pass across the desk. "It's not normal to be this quiet." But Mei knew better. Being noticed was dangerous. Being noticed meant becoming a target. And at her last school, she'd been noticed enough to last a lifetime. The backpack she carried had seen better days. The once blue fabric had faded to a dull gray in patches, and one of the straps was held together with safety pins where the stitching had come undone. Inside were her carefully organized notebooks, each subject color-coded with the supplies she could afford, and a brown paper lunch bag containing a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. "Watch it, new girl," someone called as a shoulder bumped roughly against hers, sending Mei stumbling into the row of lockers. She didn't look up to see who it was. It didn't matter. She steadied herself, adjusted her glasses, and continued walking. Room 12 was her first class of the day, Advanced Placement History with Mr. Gonzalez. Mei slipped into the classroom and headed straight for her desk in the back corner. It was the perfect spot, really. From there, she could see everyone, but most people forgot she was even there. "Did you guys hear about the assembly next week?" Kira Williams was perched on a desk near the front, surrounded by her usual group. Her voice carried across the room without effort. "My brother said they're making everyone participate somehow." Mei's stomach tightened at the word, everyone. In her experience, that word never actually included her until something embarrassing was happening. "Hey, has anyone actually heard the new girl speak?" Someone whispered loudly enough for Mei to hear. "Like, ever?" "I think she's mute or something," another voice responded. "Or maybe she doesn't speak English?" Mei kept her eyes fixed on her notebook, tracing the spiral binding with her finger. She spoke English just fine. She also spoke Mandarin at home with her grandmother, who had raised her since she was 7. But explaining that would require speaking, which would require being noticed. So she remained silent. The class filled up quickly, and Mr. Gonzalez began his lecture on the Industrial Revolution. Mei took careful notes, her handwriting neat and precise. History was her best subject. In fact, she had straight A's in everything except PE, where participation was unavoidable and always uncomfortable. When the bell rang, Mei waited until most of the other students had filed out before gathering her things. This was another strategy she had developed. Avoid the crush of bodies in the hallway, the accidental touches, the opportunities for comments or shoves. Her next class was English, followed by chemistry. Both passed in the same quiet blur of note-taking and avoiding eye contact. When lunchtime finally arrived, Mei didn't head to the cafeteria like everyone else. Instead, she made her way to the east wing of the school, where the fine arts classrooms were located. The music room was usually empty during lunch. The band kids ate together in the cafeteria, forming their own little clique, and the choir students often practiced in the auditorium. This left the classroom, with its sound-dampening walls and beautiful grand piano, completely deserted for 45 precious minutes. Mei glanced around quickly before slipping inside, closing the door behind her with barely a click. The room smelled of valve oil and wood polish, a comforting scent that immediately eased the tightness in her chest. This had become her sanctuary, the one place in the entire school where she felt she could breathe. She set her backpack down beside the piano bench and gently lifted the cover from the keys. The piano was old but well-maintained, the ivory keys showing slight yellowing from years of use. Mei ran her fingers over them without pressing down, feeling the smooth, cool surface against her fingertips. Her grandmother's apartment didn't have room for a piano. They could barely afford the rent, as it was, and lessons had been out of the question for years. But before everything had changed, before her parents' accident, before moving in with her grandmother, before the constant relocating from one small apartment to another, May had taken lessons. For 6 years, in fact. Her mother had been the one who insisted on it. Music speaks when words fail, her mother used to say. Now those words felt more true than ever. May took her lunch from her backpack and ate quickly, eager to spend as much time as possible at the piano. The peanut butter sandwich disappeared in a few bites, and she saved the apple core for later. After wiping her hands carefully on a napkin, she finally allowed herself to sit on the bench. She started softly, playing scales to warm up her fingers. C major, G major, D major. The familiar patterns brought a sense of calm that nothing else could. Then she moved into arpeggios, letting her fingers stretch and dance across the keys. The music was quiet enough that it wouldn't be heard from the hallway, but it filled the room with gentle sound. After her warm-up, May closed her eyes and began to play from memory. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing. She didn't need sheet music for this piece. She had played it hundreds of times. It was her mother's favorite. As she played, May allowed herself to get lost in the music. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened, and for a few minutes she wasn't the invisible new girl with the worn-out clothes and the too quiet voice. She was just a musician, creating something beautiful in an empty room. When the piece ended, she sat in silence for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Then she glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. 10 minutes until the bell. Time to become invisible again. She was carefully closing the piano cover when the door to the classroom suddenly opened. May froze, her heart racing as Mr. Delgado, the music teacher, walked in. He stopped short when he saw her, clearly surprised to find anyone in his classroom. "I'm sorry," May blurted out, grabbing her backpack. I didn't mean to." "Were you playing just now?" Mr. Delgado asked, setting his coffee mug down on his desk. May hesitated, then gave a small nod, already inching toward the door. "That was Chopin, wasn't it?" His voice was kind, without a trace of accusation. Another nod. "You play beautifully," he said. "Are you taking lessons here at school?" May shook her head. "No, sir, I used to, but not anymore." Mr. Delgado seemed to consider this for a moment. "Well, you're welcome to practice here during lunch if you'd like. I usually eat in the teacher's lounge, so the room is empty." "Thank you," May whispered, hardly believing what she was hearing. Permission to use the piano, official permission, was more than she had dared to hope for. "What's your name?" he asked. May Chen." "Well, May Chen, you have a gift. It would be a shame not to nurture it." The warning bell rang, saving May from having to respond. She gave Mr. Delgado a quick, grateful smile before hurrying out into the hallway, which was already filling with students returning from lunch. For the rest of the day, May moved through her classes in a daze. Mr. Delgado's words kept repeating in her mind. "You have a gift." When was the last time anyone had said something like that to her? She couldn't remember. The final bell rang, releasing students for the day. May gathered her things and headed for the bus loop, keeping close to the wall as usual. The afternoon, buses were always crowded and loud, but she had mastered the art of making herself small, taking up minimal space on the shared seat. Today, though, as the bus rumbled through town toward her grandmother's apartment complex, May found herself thinking not about how to stay invisible, but about tomorrow's lunch period. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, she was actually looking forward to something. Her grandmother was already home when May arrived, sitting at their small kitchen table sorting through bills. The apartment was tiny but spotlessly clean, with faded floral curtains and framed photos of china on the walls. "How was school today, little one?" her grandmother asked in Mandarin as May set her backpack down. Usually, May's response was the same. "Fine." a single word that required no elaboration. But today something made her pause. "I played the piano during lunch," she said quietly. "The music teacher heard me. He said I could practice there whenever I want." Her grandmother's face softened. "Your mother would be so proud," she said, reaching out to squeeze May's hand. So proud. That night, as May lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about Mr. Delgado's words again. "You have a gift." Perhaps, she thought, being invisible wasn't the only way to survive. Perhaps there was another path, one that involved sharing her music instead of hiding it away. She wasn't ready to step fully into the light, not yet. But for the first time in a very long time, May fell asleep thinking not about how to disappear, but about what it might feel like to be seen, really seen, for something she loved. The following week brought a change to Westlake High School. Posters appeared on walls and bulletin boards announcing the upcoming Spring Arts Assembly. Showcase. Your talent, they proclaimed in bright blue letters against a yellow background. Smaller text at the bottom read, "All classes expected to participate." May noticed the posters but didn't give them much thought. School assemblies were perfect opportunities to blend into the crowd, to sit quietly in the back row and become just another face among many. She certainly had no intention of participating. Her daily routine had shifted slightly since her encounter with Mr. Delgado. She still spent her lunch periods in the music room, but now she played with the door slightly, ajar instead of tightly closed. Mr. Delgado had given her permission after all. There was no need to sneak around anymore. On Wednesday, she was midway through a Bach prelude when a shadow fell across the keys. May's fingers stumbled to a halt as she looked up to see Mr. Delgado standing in the doorway, accompanied by another teacher she didn't recognize. "Don't stop on our account," Mr. Delgado said with an encouraging smile. "I was just telling Mrs. Rivera about your playing." May's cheeks grew warm. "I was finished anyway," she mumbled, already reaching to close the piano lid. Mrs. Rivera stepped further into the room. She was tall and elegant with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun. "You play beautifully," she said. "Are you planning to perform at the assembly next week?" "No," May answered quickly, too quickly. I just play for myself." Mrs. Rivera exchanged a glance with Mr. Delgado. "Well, that's a shame. We're looking for students to represent each department, and the music program could use someone with your talent." "There's the advanced orchestra," May suggested, desperate to shift attention away from herself. "Or the jazz band." "They're already performing," Mr. Delgado said, "but we wanted to showcase individual talent as well. Would you at least think about it?" May nodded, not because she was actually considering it, but because agreeing seemed like the fastest way to end the conversation. Relief washed over her when the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. She gathered her things quickly and slipped past the teachers with a hasty goodbye. For the rest of the day, May found it difficult to concentrate on her classes. The idea of performing in front of the entire school made her stomach churn. She had spent so much effort becoming invisible, and now these teachers wanted to put her on display. The very thought made her palms sweat. That afternoon, she deliberately stayed late in the library, working on a science project until she was sure the music room would be locked for the day. It wasn't that she didn't want to play. She just couldn't bear the thought of anyone else coming in and trying to convince her to perform. The next day, May avoided the music room entirely, eating her lunch quickly in a quiet corner of the courtyard. Instead, she missed the piano terribly, but it seemed safer this way, at least until the assembly had passed and everyone forgot about needing participants. Friday arrived with a sense of relief. Just one more day, and then the weekend. 2 whole days away from school and its expectations. May made it through her morning classes without incident, and was heading to her usual courtyard spot for lunch when she heard her name called over the school's PA system. "May-Chen, please report to the auditorium. May-Chen to the auditorium, please." Every head in the hallway seemed to turn toward her. May froze, clutching her lunch bag tightly. Why would they call her to the auditorium? She hadn't done anything wrong. Unless unless this had something to do with the music teachers and the assembly. With reluctant steps, May made her way to the auditorium. The large, double doors were propped open, and she could hear voices inside, lots of voices. She peered in cautiously. The auditorium was buzzing with activity. A group of students was arranging chairs on the stage while others tested microphones and adjusted lighting. Teachers moved between groups, giving instructions and checking items off clipboards. Mr. Delgado spotted her hovering in the doorway and waved her over. "There you are, May. We've been looking for you." "I heard the announcement," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "Am I in trouble?" He laughed. "Of course not. We're doing a technical run-through for the assembly, and Mrs. Rivera wanted to check the piano positioning on stage. Since you know your way around a keyboard, we thought you might help us test the sound levels." Before May could protest, he was leading her toward the stage, where a grand piano had been positioned, near the center. It was larger and newer than the one in the music room, its surface gleaming under the stage lights. "Just play something, anything, so we can adjust the microphones," Mr. Delgado explained, gesturing toward the piano bench. 5 minutes, tops." May looked around the auditorium. There were maybe 20 people present, all busy with their own tasks. No one was paying particular attention to the piano. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Just a quick test, and then she could go back to being invisible. She sat down at the bench and positioned her hands over the keys. The piano was perfectly in tune, its action smooth and responsive. May began with a simple scale, then transitioned into a gentle Debussy piece she'd been working on. The sound filled the auditorium, causing several people to pause in their tasks and look toward the stage. Mrs. Rivera appeared beside Mr. Delgado, nodding approvingly. "Perfect. The balance is just right." She made a note on her clipboard, then looked up at May with a smile. "Thank you, dear. That was lovely." May stood quickly, ready to make her escape, but Mrs. Rivera placed a hand on her arm. "Actually, while you're here, we wanted to talk to you about something. The advanced music class is preparing a special segment for the assembly, but we're short on pianists." "I'm not in the advanced class," May pointed out. "No, but you play at an advanced level," Mr. Delgado said, "and we really need someone who can handle Chopin." May's heart sank. "I really don't think it would just be one piece," Mrs. Rivera continued. 5 minutes of your time. The assembly is on Wednesday, so there's plenty of time to prepare. I don't perform in front of people," May said, her voice growing smaller with each word. I can't." Mr. Delgado's expression softened. "I understand being nervous, but sometimes we need to step outside our comfort zones. This could be a great opportunity for you. Please just think about it over the weekend." Mrs. Rivera added, "You can let us know on Monday." May nodded mechanically, desperate to end the conversation. As soon as they released her, she hurried off the stage and out of the auditorium, her appetite completely gone. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety. May tried to distract herself with homework and helping her grandmother with chores, but her mind kept returning to the teacher's request. The thought of playing in front of the entire school made her feel physically ill. "You seem troubled," her grandmother said on Sunday evening as they sat together at dinner. "Is something wrong at school?" May pushed her rice around her plate. "The music teachers want me to play piano at the school assembly on Wednesday." "That's wonderful," her grandmother exclaimed. "Your mother would be so proud." "But I don't want to," May said quietly. "Everyone will be watching me. What if I make a mistake? What if they laugh?" Her grandmother reached across the table and took May's hand. "My little one, do you remember what your mother used to say about music? That it speaks when words fail," May whispered. "Yes, when you play, you honor her memory. And whether you play for just yourself, or for one person, or for 100, the music remains the same. It is still your voice." May considered this. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared," her grandmother said. "It means you do something even though you are scared." Monday morning arrived all too quickly. May walked to school with a heavy heart, still undecided about what to tell the music teachers. She had almost reached the main entrance when she overheard a conversation that made her stop in her tracks. "Did you hear about the assembly?" a boy was saying to his friend. "Mrs. Rivera is making some random girl play piano. Apparently she's been hiding in the music room at lunch." "Sounds lame," his friend replied. "Probably just some classical garbage." May's cheeks burned. Were they talking about her? How did they even know? Throughout her morning classes, May noticed people looking at her, or at least she thought they were looking at her. Whispers seemed to follow her down the hallway. By lunchtime, her resolve had hardened. She would tell Mr. Delgado and Mrs. Rivera that she absolutely would not play in the assembly. No amount of pressure would change her mind. She headed straight for the music room, knowing Mr. Delgado would be there. Sure enough, he was sitting at his desk, eating a sandwich while grading papers. "Mr. Delgado," she began, summoning all her courage. "About the assembly." "Ah, May," he interrupted, his face lighting up. "Perfect timing. The advanced class is meeting in the auditorium right now. They're going through the program for Wednesday, and Mrs. Rivera wanted you to join them." "But that's what I came to tell you," May protested. "I don't want to." "Just come see what they're working on," Mr. Delgado insisted, already standing and gathering his things. "Then you can decide." Before she knew what was happening, May found herself being ushered back to the auditorium. This time it was filled with students, the 30 or so members of the advanced music class, all with instruments in hand. They turned to look as Mr. Delgado led May down the center aisle. Mrs. Rivera stood on the stage, directing a small group of string players. She smiled when she saw May. "Wonderful. You're just in time. We're working on the Chopin section," the students on stage whispered among themselves, eyeing May with curiosity. She recognized a few of them from her other classes, including Kira Williams, who sat in the front row of the orchestra with her violin. "Everyone," Mrs. Rivera announced. "This is May Chen. She's going to help us with the piano part for the Chopin Nocturne." May opened her mouth to object, but no words came out. Mrs. Rivera was already guiding her toward the piano. "We've arranged it as a solo with string accompaniment. The class will join in after your introduction." May sat frozen on the bench, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a casual request anymore. The teachers had already incorporated her into their program, announced her to the class. Everyone was watching, waiting. May stared at the piano keys, feeling 30 pairs of eyes boring into her back. The auditorium had fallen silent, everyone waiting for her to begin. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. "Whenever you're ready, May," Mrs. Rivera said gently. "Just like you played it in the music room." But this wasn't the music room. This was the school auditorium, with its high ceiling and echoing acoustics. This was in front of the advanced music class, students who had been playing their instruments for years, who performed regularly in concerts and competitions. Students like Kira Williams, who was watching her with narrowed eyes from the first violin chair. "I can't," May whispered, her voice so soft that only Mrs. Rivera standing beside the piano could hear. "Of course you can," Mrs. Rivera encouraged. "Just take a deep breath." May's chest felt tight, as if her lungs had forgotten how to work properly. She glanced up and caught sight of Mr. Delgado standing at the back of the auditorium. He gave her an encouraging nod. "Maybe we should let her hear the piece first," suggested a boy with glasses sitting in the cello section. "So she knows what we're doing." Mrs. Rivera considered this. "Good idea, Tyler. Let's play it once through and then May can join us." Relieved at the momentary reprieve, May sat with her hands folded in her lap as Mrs. Rivera raised her baton. The string section began to play, their bows moving in perfect unison. The melody was familiar, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the very piece May had played in the music room that day when Mr. Delgado first heard her. But the arrangement was different, adapted for strings with spaces left intentionally empty, for a piano to fill. As May listened, something unexpected happened. The music called to her, inviting her fingers to find their place on the keys. Without conscious thought, her hands lifted, and her right index finger pressed down gently, adding a note that had been missing from the string arrangement. Then another, and another. Mrs. Rivera didn't stop conducting, but her eyes widened slightly as May began to play along, finding the spaces between the string parts and filling them with delicate piano notes. The students exchanged glances, some confused, others impressed. May kept her eyes on the keys, focusing only on the music, letting it carry her through the piece. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then Tyler, the cellist who had suggested playing first, broke into applause. A few others joined in. "That was unexpected," Mrs. Rivera said, a note of pleasant surprise in her voice. "But quite beautiful. I think we found our pianist." May looked up, startled. "But I didn't agree to—" "You just played perfectly with the group on your first try," Mrs. Rivera pointed out. "That's remarkable, May. Many students practice for weeks to achieve that kind of synchronization." May wanted to disappear. She hadn't meant to play. It had just happened. And now Mrs. Rivera seemed to think she had agreed to perform in the assembly. "For Wednesday, we'll start with you playing the introduction solo," Mrs. Rivera continued. "And then the strings will join in just like we did now." She turned to the class. "Let's try it from the top, with May starting." Before May could object, again, the class was repositioning their music stands, preparing to play from the beginning. Mrs. Rivera gave her an expectant look, baton raised. Trapped, May placed her hands on the keys again. She could feel Kira and several others watching her with skepticism. Taking a shaky breath, she began to play. The introduction was just as she remembered it, a flowing, gentle melody that always reminded her of her mother. For a moment, May closed her eyes, imagining she was alone in the music room, playing only for herself. Her fingers moved more confidently across the keys, drawing out the emotion hidden within the notes. When she opened her eyes again, she was surprised to see that the string players were watching her with rapt attention. Even Kira's expression had changed from skepticism to curiosity. Mrs. Rivera held her baton poised, waiting for the perfect moment to bring in the strings. With a subtle nod from May, Mrs. Rivera's baton swept downward, and the strings joined in perfect harmony with the piano. The music swelled, filling the auditorium with sound that seemed to vibrate in May's very bones. She found herself smiling as she played, caught up in the beauty of the combined instruments. When the piece ended this time, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. "That," Mrs. Rivera said with satisfaction, "is exactly what we'll do on Wednesday. May, you're a natural." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. As the students packed up their instruments, several of them approached the piano. "That was awesome," Tyler said, adjusting his glasses. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "My mom taught me," May said quietly. It was the most personal information she'd shared with anyone at Westlake. "You should join band next year," suggested a flutist whose name May didn't know. "We could use a decent pianist." May nodded noncommittally, still overwhelmed by what had just happened. She had come to tell the teachers she wouldn't perform, and somehow she had ended up not only agreeing to play in the assembly, but rehearsing with the advanced class. As the auditorium emptied, Kira lingered behind, her violin case slung over her shoulder. "So you've been hiding in the music room all this time?" she asked, her tone difficult to read. May gathered her backpack, avoiding eye contact. "I wasn't hiding exactly. Just practicing." "Well, it paid off, I guess," Kira said, with a shrug. "Just don't mess up on Wednesday. This performance is important for college applications." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving May alone at the piano. The rest of the day passed in a daze. May barely heard her teacher's lectures, her mind stuck on the upcoming assembly. By the time the final bell rang, her stomach was in knots. What had she gotten herself into? "How did it go?" her grandmother asked when May arrived home. "Did you tell the teachers about the assembly?" May dropped her backpack on the kitchen chair. "I tried to tell them I didn't want to do it," she explained, "but somehow I ended up rehearsing with the advanced music class instead." Her grandmother's face lit up. "That's wonderful. When is the performance?" "Wednesday," May said, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. But I don't think I can do it, Nai. There will be hundreds of people watching. Her grandmother took May's hands in her own. Tell me what you're afraid of, little one. May thought about it. Making a mistake. Looking stupid. Everyone staring at me. And what is the worst that could happen if you make a mistake? People might laugh, May whispered. Or talk about me. Or think I'm not really good enough to play with the advanced class. Her grandmother nodded thoughtfully. When I first came to this country, my English was very poor. Every time I had to speak to someone, I was terrified they would laugh at me, and sometimes they did. May had never heard this story before. What did you do? I kept speaking, her grandmother said simply, because the only way to stop being afraid of something is to do it again and again until the fear loses its power over you. May considered this. But you had to speak English. I don't have to play piano in front of the school. No, you don't have to, her grandmother agreed. But your mother would have wanted you to share your music, not hide it away. She believed that gifts are meant to be shared. That night, May couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, imagining herself on stage, hundreds of eyes watching her. In some versions of her imagined scenario, she played perfectly and received a standing ovation. In others, her fingers froze, or she hit wrong notes, or she forgot the music entirely and sat paralyzed with fear while everyone stared. Tuesday's rehearsal went better than she expected. The advanced class had warmed to her somewhat, especially after Mrs. Rivera explained that May had been playing since she was 5 years old. Even Kira seemed less hostile, though she still kept her distance. Remember, for the assembly, you'll be using the grand piano on stage, Mr. Delgado reminded May as she prepared to leave. It's the same one you practiced on yesterday, so there shouldn't be any surprises. May nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of panic in her chest at the mention of the assembly. That night, she dreamed of her mother. In the dream, they were sitting together at their old piano, the one they had to sell when they moved into the smaller apartment after her father died. Her mother was showing her how to position her hands for a difficult passage. Listen to your heart as you play, her mother said in the dream. The music lives there, not in your fingers. May woke early on Wednesday morning, the dream still vivid in her mind. For the first time since agreeing to perform, she felt a sense of calm. Yes, she was still nervous, terrified even, but underneath the fear was something else. A determination to play as her mother had taught her, with her heart as well as her hands. She dressed carefully in her nicest clothes. A blue blouse her grandmother had ironed the night before, and dark jeans without any fraying at the hems. She even took extra time with her hair, brushing it until it shone and securing it with the butterfly clip that had been her mother's. You look beautiful, her grandmother said when May emerged from her room, like your mother on her first recital day. The morning classes seemed to fly by. Before May knew it, it was time for the assembly. Students filed into the auditorium, filling the seats row by row while teachers directed traffic at the doors. May waited backstage with the rest of the performers, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Mr. Delgado found her sitting alone in a corner. Nervous? He asked kindly. May nodded, not trusting her voice. That's normal, he assured her. Even professional musicians get stage fright. The trick is to remember why you're playing, not for the audience but for the music itself. His words reminded her of her dream, of her mother's advice to listen to her heart. She gave him a small smile of gratitude. The assembly began with announcements and a speech from the principal about the importance of arts education. Then, one by one, the performance segments began. The drama club performed a scene from their upcoming play. The choir sang 2 songs. A group of dancers presented a hip-hop routine that had the students cheering. And then it was time for the music department's showcase. Our final performance today, the principal announced, features our advanced music class performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major with a piano solo by May Chen. A murmur rippled through the audience. May heard her name whispered, followed by questions. Who's May Chen? Is she new? I didn't know she played piano. As Mrs. Rivera led the string players onto the stage, May stood frozen in the wings. This was her last chance to back out, to run away, to maintain her invisibility. No one would be surprised if the quiet new girl got stage fright and couldn't perform. But then she thought of her mother, and of the dream, and of her grandmother's words about being brave. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out onto the stage and walked to the piano. The walk to the piano seemed to take forever. May felt every step, heard every whisper, saw every pair of eyes turning to follow her progress across the stage. The spotlights were brighter than she had expected, making it difficult to see the audience clearly. A small blessing, she thought. She settled onto the piano bench. May took a moment to adjust her position, buying herself a few extra seconds to calm her racing heart. The grand piano gleamed under the stage lights, its polished surface reflecting her own distorted image back at her. She caught a glimpse of her mother's butterfly clip in her hair and touched it briefly for luck. Mrs. Rivera stood nearby with the string section, waiting for May's signal to begin. The auditorium had fallen silent, that particular quality of silence that comes when hundreds of people are all holding their breath at once. May placed her hands on the keys. They were cold beneath her fingertips, and for a terrible moment, she couldn't remember how the piece began. Her mind went completely blank. Panic rose in her chest, threatening to overwhelm her. Then, from somewhere deep in her memory, she heard her mother's voice. "Close your eyes. Let your fingers find the music." May closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were tentative, slightly softer than she had intended. But as the familiar melody began to take shape, something shifted inside her. Music flowed through her fingers as naturally as breathing, each note connecting to the next in an unbroken chain of sound. She forgot about the audience, forgot about the assembly, the school, even her own anxiety. There was only the music, the gentle rise and fall of the melody, the subtle harmonies underneath, the brief moments of tension and release. This piece had been her mother's favorite, and as May played, she felt closer to her than she had in years. When it came time for the strings to join in, May opened her eyes and nodded almost imperceptibly to Mrs. Rivera. The conductor's baton swept downward, and the string section began to play, their sound blending seamlessly with the piano. Together they created something larger than any of them could have achieved alone, a tapestry of sound that filled the auditorium from floor to ceiling. May found herself smiling as she played, caught up in the joy of making music with others. She glanced briefly at the string section and saw that several of them were smiling too, carried along by the same current of emotion. Even Kira, focused intently on her violin, seemed less rigid than usual, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the piece. As they approached the final measures, May felt a curious mixture of sadness and elation. She didn't want the piece to end, didn't want to break the spell that had fallen over the auditorium. But at the same time, she felt a growing sense of triumph. She was doing it, actually performing in front of the entire school, something she had been certain she couldn't survive. The final notes hung in the air for a moment, pure and perfect. Then silence, one heartbeat, two, and then the auditorium erupted. Applause thundered from all sides, so loud that May flinched slightly at the sound. Students were standing, clapping enthusiastically. Some were even cheering. The string section behind her had broken into smiles, nodding in her direction as they accepted the applause. Mrs. Rivera gestured for May to stand and take a bow. On shaky legs, she rose from the piano bench and turned to face the audience. The sea of faces looking back at her was overwhelming. She managed a small awkward bow, which only made the applause grow louder. The principal returned to the microphone, saying something about talent in the arts program, but May barely heard him over the ringing in her ears. She felt lightheaded, almost dizzy with relief and lingering adrenaline. Somehow she made it backstage where Mr. Delgado was waiting with a huge smile. "That," he said, "was extraordinary." May couldn't find words to respond. She just stood there, trembling slightly, trying to process what had just happened. "I knew you could do it," he continued. From the first time I heard you playing in the music room, I knew you had something special. Before May could reply, she was surrounded by members of the advanced music class, all talking at once. That was amazing. Where did you learn to play like that? Are you going to join the music program next year? Even Kira approached, violin case in hand. Not bad, she said, which from her seemed like high praise. You should come to rehearsals sometime. We could use a decent pianist. May nodded, still, too overwhelmed to form coherent sentences. The crowd around her continued to grow as students from the audience made their way backstage to meet the mysterious pianist who had brought the house down. Give her some space, Mr. Delgado finally intervened, noticing May's increasingly panicked expression. She needs to breathe. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, a tall woman in a dark blue dress approached. She had a kind face and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. Ms. Chen, she said, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Powell, the head of the music department at Westlake Community College. I was invited to the assembly today to see the high school's arts program, but I wasn't expecting to hear such remarkable talent. May shook her hand automatically, her mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. I oversee a scholarship program for promising young musicians, Dr. Powell continued. We offer free lessons and mentorship to students who demonstrate exceptional ability. Based on what I heard today, I'd like to offer you a place in the program. May blinked in surprise. But I haven't had formal lessons in years, she admitted. Not since my mom. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Dr. Powell's expression softened. Natural talent can only take you so far, she said gently. With proper training, you could go much further. Our program includes weekly lessons with college professors, access to practice facilities, and performance opportunities. She handed May a business card. Talk it over with your family, and give me a call if you're interested. As Dr. Powell walked away, Mr. Delgado placed a hand on May's shoulder. That's a fantastic opportunity, he said. Their scholarship program is highly competitive. May stared at the business card in her hand. Just an hour ago, she had been terrified of playing in front of the school. Now someone was offering her a music scholarship. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Students she had never spoken to before stopped her in the hallways to compliment her performance. Teachers smiled at her in a new way, as if seeing her properly for the first time. Even the principal nodded in recognition when she passed his office. By the time the final bell rang, May felt drained, as if she had run a marathon. Too many people, too many conversations, too much attention after so long being invisible. Of her longed for the safety of anonymity again, but another part, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, felt a strange new sensation that took her some time to identify. Pride. On the bus ride home, May sat alone as usual, but this time not because others were avoiding her. She simply needed space to think, to process everything that had happened. She held Dr. Powell's business card tightly in her hand, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Her grandmother was waiting for her at the apartment, practically bouncing with anticipation. Well? She demanded as soon as May walked through the door. How did it go? Instead of answering, May dropped her backpack, walked straight to her grandmother, and wrapped her arms around her in a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Little one? For telling me to be brave. Her grandmother stroked her hair gently. So you did it? You played for everyone? May nodded against her shoulder. And something amazing happened, Nai. She pulled back and showed her grandmother the business card explaining about Dr. Powell and the scholarship program. Her grandmother's eyes filled with tears as she listened. Your mother would be so proud, she said, her voice thick with emotion, so very proud. That evening, as they sat together at their small kitchen table eating dinner, May's grandmother brought out an old photo album, one of the few possessions they had kept through all their moves. She turned carefully to a page near the middle and pointed to a photograph of a young woman sitting at a piano. Your mother, she said, at her first major recital. She was about your age. May studied the photo with new eyes. Her mother looked so young, so full of life, her fingers poised above the keys of a grand piano not unlike the one May had played that day. She was wearing a blue dress, and in her hair was the same butterfly clip that May had worn to the assembly. She was wonderful, her grandmother continued. She could have gone to a conservatory, become a professional musician. But then she met your father and they fell in love, and she chose a different path. She never told me that, May said softly. She didn't want you to feel pressured, her grandmother explained. She wanted you to love music for its own sake, not because you felt you had to follow in her footsteps. May turned the pages of the album slowly, discovering photographs she had never seen before. Her mother performing on various stages, receiving certificates and trophies, standing beside impressive-looking pianos in elegant concert halls. After, your father died and we had to sell the piano, her grandmother said. I think a part of your mother died too. Music had always been her comfort, her joy. Without it. She trailed off, but May understood. The accident that had taken her mother's life had happened just months after they had been forced to sell the piano. May had always assumed it was grief over her father that had led to her mother's distracted driving that day. But now she wondered if the loss of music had played a role as well. I miss her, May whispered. She is with you every time you play, her grandmother said, squeezing her hand. I heard her today in your music. Later that night, alone in her room, May took out Dr. Powell's card again. The scholarship would mean commitment, responsibility, expectations. It would mean stepping permanently out of the shadows, giving up the safety of invisibility. It was terrifying. But as she recalled the feeling of playing with the string section, of creating something beautiful that moved other people, she knew what her answer would be. Her mother had given up music for love. Perhaps May could reclaim it for both of them. She placed the card carefully on her nightstand, next to the butterfly. Clip. Tomorrow she would call Dr. Powell. Tomorrow she would take another step into the light. For tonight, though, she closed her eyes and replayed the day's performance in her mind, feeling again the flow of the music through her fingers, the perfect synchronicity of piano and strings, the breathless silence before the applause. For the first time in years, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. The morning after the assembly, May woke to the unfamiliar sensation of anticipation. For so long, her days had followed the same pattern. Keep her head down, avoid attention, make it through until she could return to the safety of her grandmother's apartment. But today felt different. Today she found herself looking forward to going to school. Her grandmother noticed the change immediately. You seem happier this morning, she observed as May ate her breakfast with unusual enthusiasm. May smiled, surprising them both. I think I am. When she arrived at school, the first thing she noticed was that people were looking at her differently. Not the way they had before, with indifference or the casual cruelty reserved for those who didn't quite fit in. Now there was recognition in their eyes, and sometimes even respect. Hey, piano girl, called a voice as May made her way to her first class. It was Tyler, the cellist from the advanced music class. He fell into step beside her. You're basically famous now, you know that? May felt her cheeks grow warm. I just played one song. Yeah, but you played it like you wrote it yourself, Tyler said with admiration. The video's all over the school social media pages. Video? May stopped in her tracks. What video? From the assembly, Tyler explained, pulling out his phone. Someone recorded your performance and posted it. It's got like 1,000 views already. He showed her the screen, where a slightly shaky video displayed May sitting at the piano, eyes closed, playing the opening notes of the Chopin piece. The video quality wasn't great, and the sound was tinny through the phone's small speaker. But even so, May could see that there was something captivating about the performance. The girl at the piano, herself, though it was strange to think of it that way, seemed transported by the music, completely immersed in the act of creating something beautiful. I had no idea, May murmured, handing the phone back to Tyler. Well, get used to it, he advised with a grin. People are going to be talking about this for weeks. Throughout the day, May discovered that Tyler was right. Teachers who had never called on her before now greeted her by name. Students she passed in the hallway smiled or nodded in recognition. Even Kira and her friends made space for her at their lunch table, though May politely declined, preferring to visit the music room as usual. Mr. Delgado was there when she arrived, sorting through sheet music at his desk. He looked up with a smile when she entered. "I was hoping you'd stop by," he said. "How are you feeling after yesterday?" "A little overwhelmed," May admitted, setting her lunch bag on a nearby table. "Everyone's treating me differently." "That tends to happen when you reveal a hidden talent," Mr. Delgado said. "People are seeing you for the first time." May considered this. "I'm not sure how I feel about that yet." "That's fair," he replied. "It's a big adjustment. But I hope you're also proud of what you accomplished yesterday. That took real courage." May nodded, thinking of her grandmother's words about bravery not being the absence of fear. "I've been thinking about Dr. Powell's offer," she said after a moment. "The scholarship program?" Mr. Delgado's eyes lit up. "That's an incredible opportunity, May. Their program has launched several successful music careers." "I know, but..." May hesitated. "We don't have a piano at home, and my grandmother works late most evenings, so getting to and from lessons might be difficult." Mr. Delgado leaned forward. "If transportation is the issue, we can work something out. Carpools with other students, maybe. Or I could even drive you myself sometimes. As for practice space," he gestured around the music room. "You're welcome to use the piano here after school anytime I'm around. And there's a practice room at the community college that scholarship students can access whenever they want." His willingness to help brought unexpected tears to May's eyes. For so long, she and her grandmother had faced their challenges alone, never asking for assistance, never expecting anyone else to care about their problems. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll talk to my grandmother tonight." That afternoon, May found an envelope in her locker. Inside was a card signed by every member of the advanced music class, welcoming her to join their rehearsals anytime. Many had added personal notes. "Your playing was incredible. Can't wait to perform with you again." Even Kira had written something. "You've got potential. Don't waste it." By the time May boarded the bus home, she had made up her mind. As soon as she arrived at the apartment, she took out Dr. Powell's card and dialed the number with slightly trembling fingers. The conversation was brief but life-changing. Yes, the scholarship was still available. Yes, it included weekly lessons, access to practice facilities, and performance opportunities. And yes, Dr. Powell would be delighted to meet with May and her grandmother on Saturday to discuss the details. When May's grandmother returned from work that evening, May was waiting with dinner already prepared. A simple meal of rice, vegetables, and her grandmother's favorite tea. "What's all this?" her grandmother asked, surprised by the gesture. "I have news," May said, pulling out a chair for her grandmother. "I called Dr. Powell today." Her grandmother's eyes widened. "And?" "I'm accepting the scholarship," May announced, feeling a surge of excitement as she said the words out loud. "We're meeting with her on Saturday to make it official." Her grandmother's face lit up with joy. She embraced May tightly, murmuring words of pride and love in a mixture of English and Mandarin. When she finally pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "Your mother is smiling down on you today," she said. "I know it." The next few weeks brought changes May could never have imagined. Her schedule filled with new activities, rehearsals with the advanced music class 3 times a week, piano lessons with Professor Lin at the community college every Saturday, and practice sessions in the college's music building whenever she could arrange transportation. Mr. Delgado proved true to his word, driving May to the college at least once a week and allowing her to use the school piano after hours. Other members of the music class also pitched in, with parents taking turns giving May rides home after rehearsals. Even Kira, who had initially seemed so intimidating, offered to pick May up on her way to Saturday lessons since they lived in the same direction. "My mom says it's silly for us to go separately," she explained with a casual shrug that didn't quite hide her growing friendliness. Slowly, May's world expanded beyond the quiet and visible existence she had created for herself. She found herself included in study groups, invited to pizza outings after rehearsals, tagged in social media posts about music and performances. For the first time since her mother's death, she was part of something larger than herself. The most significant change, however, came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late April, when May arrived home to find her grandmother practically vibrating with excitement. "Close your eyes," she instructed as soon as May walked through the door. "I have a surprise." Curious, May obeyed. She heard her grandmother's footsteps leading her across the small living room, positioning her carefully before saying, "Now open." May opened her eyes and gasped. There, against the wall where their small bookshelf had once stood, was an upright piano. It wasn't new, the walnut finish was scratched in places, and some of the white keys had yellowed with age. But to May, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "How?" she began, her voice catching in her throat. "Mr. Delgado called last week," her grandmother explained. "The school was replacing some of their music department instruments, and he asked if we would be interested in taking this one. He and some of the other teachers arranged to have it delivered." May ran her fingers reverently over the keys, pressing one softly to hear the note ring out in their apartment, a sound she had thought she would never hear again after they sold her mother's piano. "It needs tuning," her grandmother said apologetically. "But Dr. Powell said one of the college technicians can come by next week to take care of that." "It's perfect," May whispered, sitting down on the bench. The height wasn't quite right, and the action was stiffer than she was used to, but none of that mattered. She had a piano, in her home. The circle that had been broken years ago was beginning to mend. That evening, after her grandmother had gone to bed, May sat at the piano in the darkened living room, playing softly by the light of a single lamp. She chose her mother's favorite nocturne, the piece that had changed everything for her at school. As she played, she felt her mother's presence more strongly than she had in years, as if the music was a bridge connecting them across time and space. The Spring Music Showcase was scheduled for the first weekend in May, just 2 months after the assembly that had started it all. May had been asked to perform as a featured soloist, an honor usually reserved for seniors in the advanced music program. "Are you nervous?" Tyler asked during their final rehearsal. The advanced class would be performing several pieces, including a Mozart concerto with May as the piano soloist. "A little," she admitted. "But not like before. It's different now." And it was. The paralyzing fear she had felt before the assembly had transformed into something more manageable. The normal butterflies that came with performing, mixed with excitement and anticipation. On the night of the showcase, the auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and community members. Backstage, May peeked through the curtains, scanning the crowd until she spotted her grandmother in the third row, sitting beside Mr. Delgado and his wife. Dr. Powell was there too, along with Professor Lin and several other instructors from the community college. "Ready?" Mrs. Rivera asked, appearing beside her in a formal black dress, baton in hand. May nodded, smoothing down the front of her own dress, a new one her grandmother had insisted on buying for the occasion, deep blue with tiny silver stars embroidered along the hem. "More than ready," she replied, and she meant it. As she walked onto the stage to take her place at the piano, the audience applauded warmly. There was no need for introduction. Everyone knew who she was now. May Chen, the quiet new girl who had stunned the school with her hidden talent. The scholarship student with a promising future. The girl who had found her voice through music. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and took a deep breath. In the hushed auditorium, May closed her eyes briefly, silently dedicating her performance to her mother. Then she looked up at Mrs. Rivera, gave a slight nod, and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers, filling the space with sound and emotion. But this time, May wasn't playing to escape or to hide. She was playing to connect, to her past, to her future, and to everyone listening. The girl who had once done everything possible to avoid being seen now performed with her whole heart visible for all to witness. And as the final notes of the concerto rang out, followed by thunderous applause, May knew with absolute certainty that her mother was listening to and that she was proud.